And we are back with Patrick DeHaan from Gas Buddy. He's taking your questions about gas prices right now. All right, so this first question is, how high could gas prices get?
Yeah, the $1 million question. Greensboro, obviously pretty high already, $4.28 a gallon. I'd like to say that in North Carolina, I think most of the state, $5 is something that probably won't happen. It's not impossible that if we get the right set of ingredients, a hurricane or refinery disruption or some escalation between Russia, that we could get there. But I don't think that's likely yet.
Oof. Okay, just the thought of $5. Awful. All right, this next question is, can these prices be immediately impacted through any U.S. government intervention?
Well, really only through the federal and state level by waiving gasoline taxes. That would have a profound impact. The federal gas tax, 18.4 cents. The state tax, on average, about 40 to 60 cents, depending on the state. So that may provide some relief. But overall, there's not much the government can do, right? This is a supply and demand issue. The only thing that they levy is those taxes. So that's the only way they can improve it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this next question, we've got two in a row that kind of deal with Russia. So it says, is Russia our only or biggest source of oil and gas? If not, why are we, the U.S., getting hit so hard?
Well, the U.S. received about 800,000 barrels a day of Russian products. Russia produced about 10 million barrels a day. The problem is we're all connected together. It's a global economy. Oil is a global commodity, and we still import about 5 to 7 million barrels a day. Now, most of that comes from Canada, but the problem is that it's a global commodity. And Europe, for example, if they shut off Russia, they could knock on Canada's door and say, hey, we'd like to buy your oil. And Canada would love to do it at the same price or maybe slightly above what we're paying. That would then cause us to have to bid up our price as well. So oil can flow anywhere, and that's why we are still impacted. And really anyone is impacted by anything that happens in any oil producing country.
So the next question is, why can't we just increase our own oil production so we don't have to deal with getting it from anywhere else?
Well, unfortunately, Russia is one of the world's largest oil producers, just behind us in Saudi Arabia. The problem is that finding 10 million barrels or even 5 million barrels is virtually impossible. We're talking about it taking years for the U.S. to increase its production back from 5 million barrels a day in the 2000s up to about the current level of 11.8, right? It took over a decade for that to happen. So this is a very slow moving game. Oil companies have to get permits. They have to drill and explore for oil. Not every oil yield, or not every well that they drill yields oil, and then getting that oil to the market. It's a very slow process.
All right, so that was going to be my follow-up question, like, why is that? Why can't they just ramp up production like any other kind of commodity? And that is because it takes all those different steps. All right, so this next question then is all about, all right, so where do you see it going? Do you see people stopping traveling because of the gas prices?
Well, at least for now, our gasoline demand data shows that Americans are still getting out. In fact, last week, demand for U.S. gasoline, according to our data, rose about 3%. Those are transactions that are happening on our Pay with Gas Buddy card. So even in light of record high prices, Americans are still increasing how much gallons or how many gallons they're filling up with. And that's part of the problem, is that this is an economics 101 lesson. Prices are going to continue going up until demand starts going down. And so far, there's no signs of that.
Okay, and so we've got just about 1 minute left. I mean, of all the many questions that you get, what is the one thing that you want people to go away with, the information you want them to go away with tonight?
Well, it's going to be a bumpy ride. This is not a short-term thing that we can just solve overnight. So there's going to be pain, and until that Russian oil starts flowing to the market, whether it's a regime change in Russia, I mean, if Putin pulls out of Ukraine, we're still not going to rush back into to buying Russian oil. So keep that in mind. This is probably a longer-term game that will last beyond the summer. So expect some of these elevated and higher prices to stick around not only through the summer, but potentially even a little longer than that.
Okay. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your expertise. Like, no one knows it better than you. We so appreciate it for explaining it, getting it down to what we can understand. All right. If you missed any of this, we have it all for you in the Two Wants to Know section. Check it out there.